Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? I'm Sue, and it's that time of the season yet again. Time to lock in Masters to get your World Arena skin. This time, of course, it's going to be Spirit Eye Celine, and I'm assuming if you clicked on this video, you're looking for a cheat sheet in order to kind of have like a quick draft flowchart in order to lock in that skin. To get the skin, you simply need to play at least one game after Wednesday night or Thursday morning, depending on where you live in the world, and have Masters or higher rating, and you will lock in that skin. As usual, I'm going to go through my tier list, kind of explain what are the best first picks in the format, what second picks are good. We'll talk about things here like ban protection and when to take those types of characters. And then it will wrap it up with the last picks, the stuff that you want to see in the fourth or fifth pick slot. Now, as you can tell by looking at your screen here, the format's pretty dire. It's pretty much just dictated entirely by overpowered, limited, and Moonlight 5-star heroes. And if you don't have a lot of the characters that I'm going to be talking about in the first two pick tiers, you're going to have a very hard time. Not saying that's impossible, but these characters that are in the first two tiers here in this tier list are very, very busted. They are some completely game warping, and they give you a massive advantage over your opponent if you do not have access to them. So again, if you don't have them, not saying it's impossible, you'll have to rely on some of the stuff that's like playable down here in the third and fourth picks, but it will be significantly harder. You probably should at least try to stick, I feel like, to the OP units that are in these first picks and second pick tiers, though, because again, they really are that strong in the current state of the game. So if you have them, please try to build them. Anyways, as usual, I'm going to go through each tier, give you like 5 to 10 seconds on what makes them very, very good, so on and so forth. I'm not going to talk about warfare rules at all in this video because that is for champion and above. This is specifically only for people that are trying to get masters, just have the quickest, most painless way possible because you don't normally step foot into RTA and you just want a quick, cheat sheet on what is actually the meta, what is actually strong. Anyways, 5 to 10 seconds maybe per character, longer in the first couple of tiers to kind of illustrate why they are so strong. I'll put the stats up on the screen as per usual, and if for some reason I don't, I'll kind of yap about them here and what makes them strong in the case of characters like which of the Mare Tenebria or like Heli and Lua, because I don't actually have those characters, and therefore I don't have any stat lines to show you. Anyways, first picks. These are the characters that you should be picking or banning every single game. The only two characters that I would even consider pre-banning that are not in these first two tiers are Harsetti, because you like to play very aggressively and you can't afford to have that character fall in your opponent's hands and just completely ruin your entire game plan, and Bellion, and that's largely because you want to abuse souls with Tehegel's Ancient Book or Mirrored Lotus in the case of Frieren. So yeah, if you're trying to play a lot of mages with souls, then Bellion I think is a valid pre-ban. Otherwise, I would stick to the stuff that's in these first picks, and you want to try to get whatever one that you can possibly get fall into your hands. Especially the first character we're going to talk about, which is Lady of the Scales. Lady of the Scales is just the best character currently in Epic 7 PvP. She's completely busted, 97% pick/ban rate, highest win rate character in the game. The math does not lie. Do not try to think that you can play through this character. She really is that strong. Whoever you put in the front slot for Lady of the Scales will basically get a bunch of damage share when they go to 1 HP. They'll get immortality. That means that the person in the front slot is almost guaranteed to always get a turn. So you could put like a hyper carry DPS like Bloodblade Corinne or Straze there, or a character like Yulha or Genesis Raza has like a wombo combo ult that can kill somebody, and it's basically guaranteed. That's in addition to her insane turn cycling, decent healing, full cleanse, CR push for the whole team, and then a soul burn that can basically get a potential AoE stun. Character is just insanely good. You should always pick or ban Lady of the Scales if you have her whenever possible. After that, we come to Renak, who's basically the fastest character in the game and one of the best aggressive characters overall. Even if you're not playing super aggressively, if the character's open, it's still just a very, very powerful pick that people have to respect. They don't know how fast it potentially could be. It can run over a lot of slow comps. You can steal stats with her S2, and then her S3 is fixed damage to the entire enemy team, which makes her very good against squishy team compositions. Just a free 28,000 damage every couple of turns on such a fast body that's hard to answer if she's got her stealth artifact is just very, very, very good. After that, we come to Frieren, who's the best overall damage dealer in the current format. Just huge damage. The ability to keep immunity up so she can kind of play around certain control comps if you just spam her S1. Most conventional damage dealers and teams cannot 1v1 her or beat her outright because of her defensive magic passive. Her S3 Jirajim does insane damage and has combos with characters like Ahmed to full cleave an entire enemy comp. Character's just monstrously good. Hopefully you pulled her from the collab. Moving on to the defensive picks here. Lady of the Scales yet again. So we're not going to cover that one. And then we have Bossa Runka, who's pretty much just the character that locks your opponent out from playing single target DPS. If you take Bossa Runka early in the draft and have her in the front slot, your opponent cannot actually tag anyone in your team with single target attacks until she is dead. And she's basically the tankiest character in the entire game. She has, strips, barriers, defense break, you name it. Character's just monstrously good and forces your opponent to be on a very predictable AoE kind of plan. Otherwise, there's no way they can ever beat you, in which case you just kind of won the game for free, which is why she ends up here. After that, we come to Maid Chloe, who's going to be the first of several revivers that we're going to be talking about in this video. She's one of the main reasons why this metagame is the way that it is. Her S3 being a revive, a cleanse, and also give your whole team defense buff makes it so that it's insanely difficult for your opponent to ever punch through you. They have to basically go hyper aggressive and destroy the Maid Chloe outright. Otherwise, they're just going to be in for a long, grindy game. And it's very difficult to outgrind Maid Chloe, especially if you have another reviver on your team. Just very good safe pick in a lot of first pick scenarios if she is available, because you could kind of go into an aggressive slant and she could kind of be an anchor that revives all of your DPS if they die. Otherwise, again, you could just grind it out and beat most of the other comps in the game. And then finally, we have Empyrean Illinev. Empyrean Illinev is the most flexible knight in the game, and her passive gives you penetration resistance, and penetration is what most of the damage dealers in the game use in order to actually deal real damage, like Freerin included, for example. So if you have Empyrean Illinev, your opponent's damage sources are just massively reduced, and that's in addition to being tied for the tankiest knight in the game, best Aureus holder in the game, insane turn cycling, built-in lifesteal, injury, cleanses, you name it. The character just does everything. If you're not reaching for Bossa Runka because she's banned, Illinev should be the first knight that you reach for as turn 2 player. Now let's move on to second picks. And before I jump into the characters we're going to talk about in this section, if there's still OP characters left in the first pick section, take those as your second pick because they really are that dumb. If you get multiple characters in the first pick section, it usually bodes pretty well for you. Anyways, moving on to the second picks proper now. For the aggressive players, I would recommend Spirit Eye Celine, Genesis Raz, and Aram. Spirit Eye Celine is another reviver, so she can obviously let you grind the game out. Her passive Sixth Sense makes it so that you can't actually crit her for more than half of her health. And if she has possession up, it's like, hey, if you're playing crit DPS, you're going to get punished. She's going to lifesteal it back up. You're not going to be able to kill her. So you need specific damage dealers in order to answer this character. Things like Bellion or just non-crit DPS in general. And there's not too many of those good ones in the format. She's also crazy fast and has absurd single target damage. So she's kind of like a safety net and a carry all in one. And if your opponent just doesn't have an answer, it's pretty much a free win. And again, stacking revivers in this meta is just super, super broken. Next, we have Genesis Raz, which everybody should have access to. Essentially, if your opponent doesn't have Empyrean Illinev and you do, you could take Genesis Raz, and as long as they don't go full injury comp with Urban Shadow's Shoe, you could probably just dunk them from orbit outright if they just can't kill Genesis Raz fast enough, right? Or put up skill nullifiers or invincibility or something. If they just don't have a way to deal with this S3, that's it. It's game over because it's just a huge AoE penetration nuke. And if you build him just full HP and damage, he could just team wipe people with just this one move alone. And his S2 is also have somebody's HP and seals them, which allows you to deal with very problematic characters. So even if your opponent has Illinev, you can just seal the Illinev and then just kill everybody with the S3. He is a very, very powerful nuke, very, very powerful damage option in this format. And then finally under aggressive, we have Aram. Just generically, a very good Soul Weaver for aggressive comps. If they AoE you, you get Vigor. That allows you to combo with things like Argent Wave's Hua Young against Harsetti, for example. And the S3 is just a full reset on one skill and 100% CR push and a damage amp. So you can just use it to kind of buff whatever your DPS's ultimate is multiple times. So you get like 2 Straze S3s or 2 Kisei S3s or 2 whatever, 2 Bystander Hua Young S3s, so on and so forth. Whatever your damage option ends up being. Moving on to the defensive options, we have Ruel of Light, who is commonly paired with Maid Chloe, hence the Ruel Maid meme that you may have seen on Twitch. She's just the best defensive Soul Weaver in the game, and if you pair her with another Reviver, your chances of winning just go massively through the roof. She has cleanses, great single target healing, damage limit to protect specific characters. If your opponent tries to kill somebody before her, she can just revive them with Light Ascending. Even if they try to focus her, she has an extra life with a revive, making her really good versus like aggro and cleave compositions. She's just really hard for a lot of heavy damage, low tanky teams to deal with. And then she has just an insane ability to grind versus other turn 2 teams. Basically, a turn 2 mirror usually comes down to which person has more revivers. So if you have like Spirit Eye Celine and Ruel, or Maid Chloe and Ruel, it's very, very difficult for your opponent to win that game. Next up is Bellion. Bellion is just one of the most consistent damage dealers currently in the format. And when you take a look at the top picks, it makes a lot of sense. By being able to restrict souls, you box out a lot of cleave comps that are built around mages. You stop Freerin from having defensive magic, so she's trivially easy to kill. She has AoE to go around Boss Arunca. She's just very, very strong. She doesn't have penetration, by the way, in her kit, so Illinav doesn't really mit her. That's kind of why she's here. She's just tanky and reliable damage, and she shuts off popular aggressive archetypes. That's why she ends up landing here. And then finally, the last defensive option that you could technically still play in aggro if you wanted to is Bystander Hua Young. Hardest damage dealer to build in the entire game. She normally would not be this high, but if you take a look at all the characters we just talked about, they're all either green or light. And if you look at all of the other characters that we're going to be talking about in this video, the vast majority of them are light. It is a light dominant format. She is an anti-light character, and she's immune to a lot of control that is currently in the format, meaning that she's just the most reliable, best counter pick like 90% of the time, which is why she lands as a second pick here. Now, let's move on to the ban protects. You're usually going to pick one of the aggressive or defensive options if you are the first person to have ban protection, but if you have the second pick at it, you may want to consider a counter pick. You could even take it a counter pick as your first pick. If you're like the first overall, you're the first person to third pick, if it counters one of the really OP first picks. But generally, you just pick either aggressive or defensive for the row, and then counter pick if it's necessary. All right. So, starting with the aggressive picks, we have Witch of the Mare Tenebria, who's one of the few characters I don't have, so I can't really show you how to build her, but you can look around or ask around to figure out how to build the character. Usually, it's like 250 plus speed with a bunch of effectiveness. Essentially, they made a debuffer that cleansers can't really interact with. Her S3 basically has a loss of control on your opponent's entire team, gets rid of some buffs, hits them with like redirected provoke or stun or whatever have you, so they lose their turn. And then they gain block as a debuff, so it can't really be cleansed. Then you get an extra turn. You use the S2. It puts debuffs that make it so that your opponent takes percentage-based damage. Basically, Daydream Jokers your opponent's entire team, puts her in stealth, and then from there on out, you could just use her S1 for guaranteed dual attacks, soul burn it, and kind of have her double as a second carry. It's surprising how few characters in the current game can deal with Witch of the Mare Tenebria. So if you have like Bystander Hua Young as second, and you're the aggro player, Witch of the Mare is like a prime third pick, because like Bystander is like one of the few reliable ways to deal with this character. So if you already have her and you notice that your opponent's slow, just take Witch and just run them over. After that, we come to Conquer Elias, which is like the best aggro character in the game. If you want to contest turn 1, but still have the ability to play turn 2, Conquer Elias does it pretty much better than anybody. She's good in every single kind of composition. Just CR push, redirected provoke, a little bit of barrier, dual attacks for bonus damage, and that defense breakdown on the S2 is just absolutely massive. Can allow you to just completely shred a specific character, and it's also your best line into going into Argent Wave's Hua Young for a potential cleave, but I would only do that if you are banning Harsetti as one of your pre-bans. Again, Conqueror has always been a very good character, but she's exceptional this season in a format where most of the fast characters of the game aren't really particularly very good. After that, we come to Ahmed, which is basically going to be your cleave character. So if you are trying to actually cleave with Ahmed, then that's what she's here for. You just press S2, S3, give greater attack buff to a specific glass cannon carry, have them use their ultimate, and hopefully it cleaves and wins the game. Characters like Argent Waves Hua Young, or like Straze, or any of the Kiseis are the things you commonly pair her with. The build that you see on screen here is pretty much my counter-based build that is meant largely for turn 2 players. If you're going to be playing her as turn 1, you don't need this setup. You just want to go full speed as fast as possible. After that, we come to my girl, New Moon Luna. She's still good. She just is not somebody you could pick super early on. Having the AoE seal and full strip and unbuffable is still completely backbreaking. It's just, you can get bystandered, or your opponent can go Infinite Horizon to Katie's, or your opponent can just play characters that don't really give a damn about her. Like if they have Bellion and take a bunch of ER characters, it's not really going to work. So you have to kind of pick your moment with New Moon Luna, but she's still super OP in the spots where you can use her. The build that I have on screen is the Etika Scepter build, which I use to kind of like slowly DPS people down and still have the threat of the seal and the full strip. After that, we come to Briar Witch Aceria. Briar Witch is essentially the anti-reviver character of the format, but requires you to play somewhat aggressively, almost cleave levels, for you to really get value out of her. The character just doesn't have the damage or the bulk to really grind, so if you're gonna pick her, make sure it's because you're trying to run your opponent down. And then finally, the last one here is Lone Wolf Payra. Largely, if you're going for many dark units, this is the one to go with. Because there's so much anti-fixed damage in the format, the Uberius' Tooth build feels kind of lackluster, so you may want to go Sweet Miracle, for example. Still a fine unit, but you have to really pick your spots with Payra. I would not be picking this character early on in the draft. I'd usually think it just doesn't work out. Moving on to the defensive picks now, we have Empyrean Ilnav, which we already talked about as a first pick, but if for some reason it's still available, third pick Band Protection to secure that Aureus Knight, to secure that penetration resistance is very, very powerful, which is why I wanted to make sure I highlighted it here. After that, we come to Setsuka, which is basically the character you take if you just want to throw your hands up in the air and let RNGesus take the wheel. It's just a really hard speed bump for a lot of people to deal with. There's just not enough good things in the current format to deal with her. Next patch, you know, at the end of this month, this character will be maybe not forgotten, but a lot easier to deal with. She would not land here, I feel like, on this tier list in a couple of weeks. But for right now, might as well abuse it. If you just don't know what to pick, you feel like you're in trouble, just take Setsuka on 3 and just pray that just the random dodge encounters is enough to carry you. After that, we have Fallen Cecilia. Fallen Cecilia is basically the Aureus Knight you take if Ilnav is not available, or your opponent has Renak and Maid is not available, and you need an anti-fixed damage character. That's basically her role, just the best or second best Aureus Knight, I should say, in the format. If you need the fixed damage, then all the more reason to take her. The anti-fixed damage, I should say. New Moon Luna here again under defensive. I just wanted to highlight that yes, you could play her in turn 2. She can absolutely grind out games, especially if you're on the Etika Scepter build. And then we have Crimson Armin after that, who is tied with Fallen Cecilia as the second best tank in the format. She provides more damage reduction than Fallen Cecilia, so if you need a tank, and for whatever reason Ilnav is gone, Armin is basically the go-to at that point. FCC is probably a little bit worse. You're mainly playing her for the ability to have the anti-fixed damage. Then we have Silvertide Christie. Silvertide Christie is basically the character you take where if you have one character that you specifically cannot afford to get debuff, like say your opponent locked in Witch of the Mare Tenebria on 3, and you just don't have any way to kind of get around that, take Silvertide Christie, put her in whatever slot, and then put the character that you need to protect to make sure it doesn't get stunned, to make sure that it has a chance of taking a turn in the back slot. That's pretty much the main reason to take the character. And then finally, we have Adventurer Raz, who's just all reliable tank. If you've got nothing else, you usually want to combine him with certain characters like Tori or another damage dealer to take advantage of his S2. Looking at the counter picks, Yulha is number 1 here in this category, and that's because she's the best Aureus Knight to take when your opponent has Frieren, because Frieren is usually very fragile, and any damage that she deals to Yulha will be reflected back at her, which gets through defensive magic. She's also just got insane combos with Lady of the Scales. Like, if you already have Lady of the Scales on 1, Yulha is very, very powerful as a third pick. And for her exclusive equipment, you usually want to use the S3 reset on kill. Festive Ida is up next in the counter picks. Basically, if your opponent has AoE or strips of any kind and knocks her out of stealth, they're going to be in a world of hurt for a bunch of fixed damage. So if your opponent doesn't have Fallen Cecilia, doesn't have Maid Chloe, but they have squishy characters like Spirit Eye Celine, or for example, Freeran, you can use Festive Ida, press S3 once you have the Shyness buff, and watch the entire enemy team just completely disappear. After that, we come to Harsetti. I honestly don't really like taking Harsetti at all on 3. I think she's really easy to counter. I would only take her on 3rd pick ban protection if you know exactly what you're doing and you have the second, like 3rd pick overall, as in like you are the second person to come to the ban pick protection. I don't like her any earlier than that. I think she's much better as a 4th, 5th pick, but I do want to highlight her here because she is very, very powerful. It's just she has a lot more counters than she used to. I usually only really use her to kind of cut my opponent off from having turn 1. Like if they don't ban Harsetti as a pre-ban and they start taking things like Conquer Lilius and Peyra and New Moon Luna early, then like a late pick Harsetti or a ban protect Harsetti usually just kind of spells disaster for them. After that, we come to Ocean Breeze Lulika, who is the newly buffed character thanks to her exclusive equipment. You basically are only taking Ocean Breeze Lulika whenever your opponent is going Ahmed, because it completely ruins their entire day. They press S2, Ocean Breeze Lulika shoots up, you get full focus, you press S3, you wipe all the skill nullifiers, and then you silence and blind their entire team, and the cleave is completely dead. After that, we come to Urban Shadow Shu. If your opponent is very heavy on bruisers, or like they have Genesis Raz, and you just desperately don't have a way to deal with his penetration, you could take Urban Shadow Shu, grind out the game with injury, or just have a faster Shu go ahead of Raz, press S3, completely injure him down by like 30%, give or take, and that way your team should hopefully survive his nuke. Last Rider Crow is next. Usually you play him when your opponent is heavy on AoE, like they have like maybe they went Freeran and Bellion together, so that way you couldn't counter her that way. Last Rider Crow on Crown of Glory works really, really well there, because then they can no longer get souls for Freeran, and you'll just be getting a ton of value out of his S3. He's also still really good, by the way, into Harsetti. Infinite Horizon Acades after that, mostly just when you are up against New Moon Luna. After that, we come to Solitary of the Snow. Only really played when your opponent is on focus units, so think like Urban Shadow Shu, Sylvan Sage Vivian, Afternoon Soak Flan, so on and so forth. Similarly, Sea Phantom Politis is if you need an opener, but you need to restrict Fighting Spirit or focus in some way from the opponent. That's when you're going to be choosing her. Zio is if you need like a turn 1 button. I think Harsetti is usually better in most circumstances, but a lot of fast players ban Harsetti, not necessarily Zio. So if you need a character to make sure that you get turn 1 to cut off like a Renak or a specific other annoying character early, this is where you would take him. Sage Ball and Saison isn't really particularly great in my opinion, but if you're desperate for another character that can head off fast drafts like Ahmed, for example, then he could be somebody that works in a pinch. Laya is here as a potential cleanser, but isn't really good into like Empyrean Illinav, and not very good to take early on overall. But still, I wanted to highlight her here. I think her new exclusive equipment with the guaranteed dual attack in the back slot can set up some pretty aggressive drafts. Overall, I think this is the earliest I would take her, but usually 4th or 5th I think might be a little bit better. And then finally we come to Twisted Eidolon Charon. You usually just want to build him as much HP and bulk as possible with like over 100 ER, and then just kind of sit back and wait until your S3 charges and use it. You're mostly only ever picking him into spots with like Spirit Eye Celine or Setsuka or Freeran, right? Because it's guaranteed fixed damage, 15k. It can't be dodged whatsoever, so it just completely destroys a lot of these like Setsuka teams that are relying on RNG. And again, really squishy carries that are normally hard to deal with, like Freeran and Spirit Eye Celine. Moving on now to the last picks, I'm just going to really quickly explain when you'd want to use one or another for all of these characters. Anyways, let's get started. We have Afternoon Soak Flan first. Basically, if you need a powerful damage dealer, this is one that you could absolutely take, guaranteed dual attacks. You already know how strong this character is. She's just not safe to take early on. Otherwise, though, I think she is still very, very good. Death Dealer Ray, just generically always going to be good in the 4th, 5th pick slot because you can't afford to pick him early. Otherwise, your opponent goes Schneel, or they take things like Bystander Hua Young, who just do not care about the character whatsoever. That's why he lands here in 4th, 5th pick. Still as broken as he always was, just Gotta use him super late in the draft, otherwise you get punished. Next is Schneel. Basically, if you see Death Deal Array, you take Schneel, and if your opponent just doesn't ban it, it's a free win, or you just hold that character hostage. DN is up next. I only have DN here not because she's necessarily good, but because a lot of people out there, you probably don't have Empyrean Illinev, and then DN just becomes kind of your best option versus Genesis Raz at that point. If you need anti-pen, she's pretty much your only other option for it if you don't have Empyrean Illinev. Crow is up next. He could be a pretty good late pick because just sometimes Horse is just really powerful. It can absolutely close out games. He could kind of be like a secondary off tank or another knight for you, especially if he's on Holy Sack. And again, Horse can just steal games. That's kind of why he's here. Lionheart Sirmia. You're only ever really picking her into Setsuka because you'll get a million procs of her. Otherwise, she's pretty mediocre right now. Mort, very similar. Doesn't do a whole lot. If you see Setsuka or like other heavy counter-based teams, that's when you take Mort. Speaking of counter-based teams, Navy Captain Landy is next. Basically, if you need the crit resistance buff for buff stacking, to deny certain crits at the start of the fight, or just to pray to RNGesus for a lucky counter like with Setsuka, that's when you take this character. Seaside Bologna, if your opponent is really heavy on AoE with like things like Freerin and Bellion, if you have a very tanky team with a lot of Soul Weavers like Maid Chloe, Bossa Runka, right? Seaside Bologna will do a enormous amount of extra damage, especially if you are on her Reingar special drink, because that splash damage can get through things like defensive magic on Freerin. That's why I have her here. Tori, just the combo with Adventure Raz is still really good. It can absolutely destroy characters if your opponent is just not prepared for it. If they don't have like Bossa Runka, they're not particularly tanky, then Tori can absolutely sweep if they're not set up to deal with her properly. Young Senya, always just going to be good here versus heavy AoE compositions that are going to always proc her, like Harseti or like Bellion, for example. You might be able to set this up properly, especially if you have some of these other green units that are very, very strong in the format. You can even play her with like Freerin or even Renac just to get the free proc. It's something to consider, right? Bloodblade Corinne, just the staple, strong 4-star DPS, basically your best budget damage dealer in the entire format. Combos well with Lady of the Scales. Amid, you could tank down with her because she has innate sustain and is hard to deal with. Just very, very strong damage dealer. Inferno Kawazu, because of things like Freerin and Bellion being everywhere in the format, sometimes your opponent just has to give you the AoE attack, which will trigger him, and you can basically kill characters in one shot, especially a lot of these squishier characters, the problematic ones to deal with that I keep talking about, like your Freerins, like your Spirit Eye Celines. New Kid Auden, just generic injury DPS versus bruiser comps, but mainly you play her versus Harseti. If your opponent takes Harseti early, New Kid Auden is the character you usually reach for because just Harseti can't beat this character in a long match. After that, we come to Sinful Angelica, primarily more for aggressive players, but hey, like if you need an anti-revive character and you don't have Briar Witch, that's kind of where this character lands. Next up is Veronica. Everyone should have access to this character, assuming you've beat episode 5. Just speed imprint for the aggressive players that allows you to take Bloodblade Corinne safely. Otherwise, for everybody else, it's just an anti-immortality tech, can work against Lady of the Scales if, heaven forbid, you actually have to play against it. Good against Bloodblade Corinne. Good against the next character that we're going to talk about, Inheritor Amiki. Speaking of Amiki, just basically your best anti-cleave, anti-aggro character that you can take as a free-to-play player. If your opponent is just super aggressive, all squishy characters, you could just jam Inheritor Amiki on 4/5. And if they don't ban it, it's probably a free win. If you get any of her built-in counters or built-in Elbrus, they're probably dead. If they just have no way to shut the character down, you just press S3 and cleave through their entire team. Super, super good versus fast, aggressive, squishy comps. And then we have Researcher Carrot here, just a budget option versus Freerin if you have nothing else, because burns do a lot of damage this season. So being able to just stick a couple of burns on Freerin might be able to give you the ability basically to kill her in one hit. Could also work again against Spirit Eye Celine. Okay, so now let's move on to the category of if you have turn 1. So basically if your opponent's really slow and you're confident that you're outspeeding, or you've already taken a fast character like a Conqueror Lotus or a mid, these are basically the characters that you reach for. So let's start with Araminta. Araminta is a character that I don't have built, but it's pretty simple. If your opponent is very slow, Araminta is just devastating for them. You press S2, full strip all of their characters, they get a bunch of CR push because of it, and then Araminta takes her extra turn, presses S3, stuns the entire enemy team, puts burns down on them, and that can be enough to just outright win you the game, especially if they're trying to use harder to deal with characters that are still squishy, like Freerin, for example. Argent Waves Hua-Young, this is usually the one that you reach for if your opponent is very slow and you have Conquer Aurelius and you have Harseti pre-ban. If there's just no way for your opponent to contest turn 1 whatsoever, and you know you have it locked up with Conquer Aurelius, Argent Waves is usually just a force ban outright. You press S3, and then take the extra turn off of the Vigor, and then just cleave them. Alternatively, you could build it as you see here on your screen. I use this versus Harseti in particular. Basically, I put a Ram under 3rd pick ban protection, take Argent Waves in the 4th pick slot, and if they just give me the combo, I just win the game because, well, the second they AoE, I am going to end up taking an extra turn with Argent Waves and then just cleave through them. Next up, we have Freyda. Freyda is basically if your opponent has taken Bellion and you're trying to cleave them with some kind of mage comp. That's pretty much all she's really here for. Hellion Lua, another character I don't have access to. Kind of like a bad version of Witch of the Mare Tenebria. If you have turn 1 and your opponent just hasn't drafted any cleansers yet, a last pick Hellion Lua is just backbreaking in the same way that like a last pick Death Dealer Ray is backbreaking. That's kind of it. Next up is Kisei and Judge Kisei. Basically, if you have Ahmed and you're trying to cleave the opponent, basically choose whichever Kisei you want. They're both good. They do the same exact thing. After that, we come to Operator Segret. If you have turn 1 and you see your opponent is most likely on a protection set Knight, or, you know, has like Fallen Cecilia, for example, then that's when you take this character. You S2, hopefully potentially pick off a character. If not, the new exclusive equipment gives you an extra turn no matter what. You press S3, push back the enemy team, get some buffs for your team, and then just kind of, you know, do your thing with your aggressive team. That's kind of all there is to it. Pirate Captain Flan, if you can land a debuff with an aggressive opener, you'll get the CR push, which will allow you to set up bombs, stuns, things like that. Silverblade Araminta is very much the same. You really want to be pairing her with a character much faster than her that has some kind of strip, like Conquer Aurelius. Just strip away the immunity at the start. Use the S3 on Silverblade Araminta to stun everybody and burn them, much like with Red Araminta. I think Silverblade Araminta is much easier to set up, but Red Araminta is much more potent and self-sufficient. So if you've got the gear, and I think you can only play one, it's probably Araminta. After that, we come to Sylvan Sage Vivian. Normally, you can play her versus teams that are a lot of debuffs alongside a bystander Hua-Young to just completely blank those characters and not make them good. But the reason why I have her here is on book, if you compare her with a character like, say, Ahmed, for example, you can absolutely cleave with the character. You can use the CR push of a character like Conquer Aurelius to kind of push her closer towards the front, and then just use her Soul Burn to get 2 big fat AoE attacks at the start, which can be very, very useful, especially if it's a squishy team that's behind Boss Arunca. And then Straze, just Mr. Cleave himself. If you just know that you're faster than your opponent, you just know that Straze is going to be guaranteed a turn before them, you just press S3, S2, and just completely nuke at least one character out of the fight, possibly multiple, and win the game outright. Moving on now to the versus control or effect resistance frenzy units. We have Designer Lilibet. Not really a fan of her too much in this format, but hey, just like with Sylvan Sage Vivian, sometimes your opponent just picks a comp that's all debuffers and no damage. In those situations, Designer Lilibet's fantastic because she's just going to get so many turns in the course of a game. And even though she can't normally solo carry, if you're just going to be proccing emergency stitching every single turn, you could kind of just run away with the game. Disciplinary Prefect Aria is up next. Just a really good bruiser to grind the game out. Just take away your opponent's ability to use their debuffers because of her just massive ER built in and the ER that she gives to your team. If you have any amount of ER built on your like Soul Warriors, like Maid Chloe, Ruel of Light, and your opponent just doesn't have the ability to grind the game, you can take Aria, kind of sit back, relax, make it so that there's no way they can really deal with you damage wise, and their debuffs are basically blank, and you just grind the game out with her S3. Next up is Mediator Kuwer, just reliable cleanser that also just happens to put up some decent damage thanks to his exclusive equipment. Basically, you take either him or Laya if you need a cleanser that can give tempo and damage to your team somehow. And then we have Commander Lorena here. Not really the most consistent unit currently on the ladder. She's got a really bad win rate, but like, hey, if you need a damage dealer that's hard to deal with, that has a bunch of ER versus control, she can absolutely work. I think that if you want to play her and you don't have the gear to get her ER up, then you could take something like, say, Silverblade Christie, or I should say Silvertide Christie, under the 3rd pick band protection slot, and then lock in Commander Lorena as one of your DPS in 4-5. And then to round out here the video, we have the versus combat readiness team / non-attack skills. So basically, if your opponent's going to be using things like, say, Lone Wolf Peyra, Ahmed, or maybe even Conquer or Lilius, for example, these are usually the things you reach for to counter it. So we have Abyssal Euphine. Not really safe enough to be a 2nd pick overall, but hey, if you picked her like 4th or 5th pick every single game, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. She's still a solid damage dealer that can absolutely carry a game solo by herself. She's still just as good as she always was. It's just a bit riskier to take her in the top half of the draft, which is why she lands here. But you mainly take her to kind of slow down these aggressive drafts that are trying to take too many turns off of the back of things like, say, Lone Wolf Peyra. After Abyssal, we come to Celine. Honestly, I don't really like Celine whatsoever in this format, but hey, if your opponent is playing like a Ram, for example, and that's like the cornerstone of their entire draft, you could take Celine and use Blink and Intuition like you always have to be able to disrupt that character, get the Soulburn Thunderclap, and just pick off a character. I think you're just going to have a really, really hard time using this character in a lot of scenarios. Like Conquer might be the only one that feels like super great, but even then, you always still have Ocean Breeze Luluka, who's always been a hard counter to the character. So I think I'd probably rather lean in that direction before I pick Celine. She's fine, but I think she's gonna, fall flat, I feel like, more often than not. And then we come to Red Politis. Basically, if you're just trying to slow your opponent's tempo down like Lone Wolf Peyra, or you are trying to actually deal with Ahmed, right? This is a way to do it. Your opponent presses their skills, it'll clear all their skill nullifiers, and if you proc an Abyssal Crown proc, cool, you probably just won that game outright, but otherwise there's not really much of a reason to pick Politis. All right, and there you have it. That is it for the Celine skin cheat sheet. If I missed anything or you have any questions, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below or hit me up on Discord. I've already gotten just an astronomical amount of requests from people to have me help them with this season, so I don't necessarily know if I'll be able to help you out, but if you are struggling, please reach out to me earlier rather than later. I cannot guarantee that I'll be able to help you this season because, again, people really hate this season and a lot of people are really hoping for help, input, coaching, things like that for the season. So again, best of luck. Hopefully this was of some help to you, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week. I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.